Good morning, afternoon, or evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dark News live for July 22nd. Very happy to be here today. We're going to talk about the latest dark market price indicators. We'll talk about a couple news stories, talking about how Coinbase is a little bit naughty recently, and we'll also be talking about the New York Department of Financial Services. And of course, we'll be answering your questions as well. If you want to throw some questions in for consideration at the end of the show, you can tweet at me at Dark News Show on Twitter or hashtag Dark News, and you can also use the Q&A app as usual. And of course, the show is listener funded, so if you're enjoying this particular episode and want to see the show continue and thrive, feel free to send a few bits our way. We have various donation options, and I will throw QR codes up on the screen in the edited version of the episode. I won't bother doing that now during the live version, but you can always go back and look at the edited versions on the YouTube channel, on the World Crypto Network channel, and you can find all of the episodes for Dark News at darknews.tv. So let us start off with the dark market prices for July 22nd. So mostly boring week for a lot of these price indicators that we're tracking. Gold and silver, not much movement. Bitcoin, literally the same price that it was a week ago. Lots and lots of lateral movement for Bitcoin, as we'll see in the charts in just a moment. Darkcoin did recover a little bit this week. The dollar lost about 12% of its value relative to Darkcoin this week. And it's still sitting at number 6, just below Purecoin. A non-coin, modest move up for a non-coin in the last week. It's currently sitting at number 42 in the cryptocurrency rankings. A little bit of a recovery for Fedora coin in terms of its ranking. It's up to number 119, which is still fairly far down in the rankings, of course, and still sitting at, you can buy 3.85 million Fedora coins with every US dollar. Now, last week, Bitcoin was up and Monero was down, but this week it's the opposite. So the dollar gained 60% of its value relative to Bitcoin last week, and Bitcoin has actually dropped down to number 16 in the rankings for cryptocurrencies. Monero has actually exceeded and passed Bitcoin in the rankings. It's now sitting at number 11, and the dollar lost 40% of its value relative to Monero. So good week for Monero and a down week for Bitcoin. Cloakcoin also had a good week. The dollar lost 31% relative to Cloakcoin this week, and Cloakcoin is now sitting at number 19. And I think that's an interesting coin to keep an eye on. We'll dig into some more specifics about Cloakcoin in the near future. And overall, for all the different prices that we're tracking, the market cap is up just about 0.69% in the last week, so not much of a move, mostly predominated by the movements in gold and silver. So if we take a look at the chart for some of the cryptocurrencies that we're tracking for the show, you can see, as I said before, Monero up this week and Bitcoin down. Lots and lots of lateral movement for Bitcoin for months now. We've been tracking it well before early April on the show, and it's just been moving sideways and sideways and sideways. It's quite a consolidation phase for Bitcoin, and I expect that in the not too distant future there will be a significant surge up, but your guess is as good as mine for when that might happen. So early April, we're getting into late July, so that's May, June, July, so about 3-4 months of this kind of lateral movement. Darkcoin, just a modest bump in the last week. A non-coin, again, still moving pretty sideways. Fedora coin still in its current slump, and might even think about taking Fedora coin off of some of the off of these charts, because it doesn't seem to be moving in any interesting ways recently. If we look at some of the top altcoins that are sitting below Bitcoin and Litecoin, we can see there's been some movement in this last week. So Next is still sitting, reigning king below Litecoin at number 3. Now Ripple has gained continued ground at sitting at the number 4 cryptocurrency. Quite interesting, you know, a few weeks ago, one of the founders of Ripple left Ripple Labs, and people were predicting disaster for Ripple, but it seems as if Ripple is continuing to regain some of that traction that we saw that it lost, around the end of May, it appears from this chart. Peercoin moving sideways, Darkcoin just up a little bit, Dogecoin down just a little bit. It's been a long-term slump for Dogecoin. And if we kind of look at the different cryptocurrencies that are in competition in this area, Dogecoin is kind of the lone Doge out, so to speak, because all of these other cryptocurrencies have some kind of pretty significant fundamental crypto technology that differentiates themselves from their competitor. So Next, obviously, it's a proof-of-stake coin. It's written from scratch cryptocurrency. It's got these kind of decentralized exchanges. Ripple is also very much focused around decentralized exchanges, but pretty different from Next, I would say. Peercoin is one of the top proof-of-stake coins. Darkcoin right now, the highest market cap amongst the privacy-oriented coins, of course. A Namecoin for registering domains and all other kinds of different assets that you could reserve for yourself. MadeSafe is related to the MadeSafe network, of course. So all these different cryptocurrencies, except for Dogecoin, have some very fundamental, important technical difference differentiating themselves. In Dogecoin, it's really been always about the community and about fun and so forth, and that's quite a different differentiator from some of these other cryptocurrencies. So as I mentioned, Ripple has been up a little bit in the last week, and I think much of that has been due to just in the last couple of days, Ripple announced that they are working on a new smart contract platform. They're calling it Codius, and it will be compatible with a variety of programming languages, fairly programming language agnostic, they say. And this, I think, would be mainly oriented towards people who can code, right? So it's not the average person that's going to be writing these smart contracts. But you could certainly use this as a platform to build asset structures, so to speak. And the details of how it works are not particularly pertinent to the show, so I'm not going to dive into exactly how Codius works. But if you're interested, I can put a link in the description of the video for you to take a closer look at this CoinDesk article. And if you look at just a logarithmic view of some of these top coins, we can see things just a little bit more clearly. So as I said before, Ripple is up and coming closer and closer to Next right now. And let's see what else is going on here. Lots of sideways movement for a lot of these coins. Bytecoin, down a little bit, and in fact, it's been surpassed by Monero, which is not on here today, but. So mostly sideways movement for the majority of these cryptocurrencies, I would say, which is made more clear by looking at the logarithmic view. So that will do it for today's cryptocurrency prices and gold and silver prices and amber prices and all that good stuff. So let's jump into our first story for today. So actually, in a very significant way, this is old news. It's just sort of gaining traction in getting the attention of the cryptocurrency community, including myself. But actually, we're talking about a tool and some research based around this tool called FP Detective. FP standing for fingerprinting. The idea is fingerprinting is technology that allows a website to look at the metadata that any web browser is sending to it, and to try to uniquely identify that particular web browser user on the internet. And some of this data would include things like which system fonts you have installed on your computer, what version of different plugins like Adobe Flash that you're running, all this kind of stuff. And so what this tool does is it kind of crawls the internet, looks at different popular websites, or at least they in their research they pointed at some of the top websites in terms of traffic, and it said, can we tell whether this website is attempting to fingerprint our little virtual web browser? And what they found was that many of these websites are in fact doing this. Now the relevance to the Bitcoin space, of course, is that Coinbase was discovered to be complicit in this browser fingerprinting. We'll talk about why that might be in just a moment. But as I said before, so this was actually presented in November 2013. I think that the slides for it may have even been posted as early as October 2013. So relatively old news, but it is, sort of getting our attention more recently. So what Coinbase is doing in particular is JavaScript-based font probing. The idea being that on a variety of their web pages at Coinbase.com, they have some JavaScript that's running in the background that will kind of ping your system and say, hey, tell me, do you have this font loaded on your system? Do you have this font loaded on your system? And it just does that over and over for a whole lot of different types of fonts that Coinbase is aware of. And based on the particular fonts that you have installed on your system, it tries to get a good kind of fingerprint or identification of you as an individual web user. And so I guess it's sort of, according to this data, is polling for 206 different fonts. And yeah, I'm not really sure what the remaining of these numbers are here. I can't really tell just by looking at it. But just below here it says, with FP Detective, we found 404 different sites in the Alexa top million pages. Alexa is just a company that ranks different web pages based on how much traffic they get. And they found that these sites fingerprint visitors on their home pages using JavaScript-based font probing. And the scripts are served by 13 different fingerprinting providers, of which only one had been identified in prior research. So finding some new responsible parties for this. Now let's talk about countermeasures. In particular, I want to talk about the last two. So if you didn't want to be tracked in this way, what would you do? Well, apparently there's a plugin for Firefox called Fire Gloves that you could use to try and what it does is when websites ask you, do you load this font, you give it back a bunch of random data and make it look like nonsense and make it harder for them to identify you individually. There's also this kind of do not track thing that they invented in the last few years, which is supposed to be a special kind of like header that your browser sends to websites saying, the user of this web browser does not want to be tracked for advertising and so forth. And so if they comply with it, then they're not supposed to be doing this type of stuff. But of course, Coinbase is not obeying this. Even if you check the box for do not track in your web browser, Coinbase is not going to honor that according to these results. This was, of course, at least the case back in November, towards the end of last year. Hard to say exactly what's going on this year. Now, I tried to track down the particular script, particular file on Coinbase, just to make sure that that in fact they were serving up this kind of these scripts that would try to track people, and B, if I could see what the content of that tracking was, what it looked like. Take a look at the source code. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the files. The files that are cited in this particular research, they've been taken down since then. So Coinbase still could be tracking people in this way, but they've at least moved the script around so that it's, if I had to guess, I would say they probably saw this research and they probably continued to do the same thing, but they simply moved it to a new location that's not called out specifically by this research. I haven't found any public statements by Coinbase on these findings. And so I'm very curious to see what Coinbase would have to say as a company about why they are attracting people in this fashion. So let's talk about why Coinbase would be, doing this kind of practice. So browser fingerprinting, it's not necessarily a malicious thing, right? It's very popular for banking websites, for example, to do this type of browser fingerprinting, or just in general to try and get a sense of who is accessing the banking website. So they'll log your IP address that's accessing it. They will, take other measures to try and identify and distinguish between legitimate people who are accessing the website legitimately and who are trying to hack into online bank accounts. And Coinbase is kind of like an online bank account. You can keep dollars there, you can keep Bitcoins there, you can deposit and withdraw from there. So for all intents and purposes, it's a pretty banky type website. And so people who want to defend Coinbase, the first thing they point out is, well, look, they're kind of a bank type website. This is common for banks, and so they're doing this so that if a user is always accessing Coinbase and they always have the same kind of identity to Coinbase in terms of how their web browser is configured, and then all of a sudden you have this access from a new IP address, totally different browser configurations, then there's a much greater possibility that something bad is going on. And at that point, they can start to look closer at what this new user is doing. Is it someone that's trying to hack in? Do they have a number of failed login attempts that are taking place? Are they trying to withdraw a bunch of money all of a sudden, which is out of character for that particular user? There's lots of different things they could do to try and identify this as a possible theft or something wrong going on there. And that's all well and good, but we've also had a slew of stories of users who use Coinbase who have had their coins stolen. And so my question would be, well, if they were doing this fingerprinting for the purposes of identifying bad users who are trying to steal coins, what the hell have they been doing with that information? Because it seems like there's so many people who have said, yeah, shit, I got my password stolen, perhaps my email was compromised, and so my two-factor authentication was also compromised, and someone through Tor or some other network, they accessed my account, they withdrew a bunch of coins, and now my Coinbase account is emptied out. And so in fact, if they were doing it for that purpose, then the question would be, well, why do we keep hearing about these stories? And so it's a big question mark. Now, the other thing another thing they could possibly be doing with this data is they could be using it to comply with Know Your Customer regulations, right? So there's all these regulations that if you are a bank type institution, you're a money transmitter type business, and you're interacting with U.S. customers, then you're supposed to be collecting information about your customers, who they are, what their name is, what their bank account information is, etc. And so potentially this would be information that could augment that data. Now the problem with this idea is that there's no, it's not so clear about exactly how this would give you better information about a particular individual, right? Like your name, your social security number, information about you as a citizen, not particularly relevant to your browser fingerprint. It certainly would help you better identify an individual, but not from the perspective of the government or a banking institution or anything like that. It's really what else, it would help you figure out what else that person is doing on the web, and that's really not the business of Coinbase. They should have no privilege in terms of looking at what people are doing, what their customers are doing on other areas of the web. I haven't been able to confirm this, but some people who have looked at the report have suggested that this is not only being done to Coinbase customers, but perhaps also to customers of other companies who are simply using Coinbase as a third-party processor. And so, for example, on my website, anonymousbitcoinbook.com, there's like a donate link for people to send me Bitcoins through there. And I use right now, I think I'm going to get rid of it probably after this, but right now I'm using a a donation link that is generated through Coinbase's accounts. I can log into my account, generate these donation buttons. The cool thing about it is that every time you click on the button, every time a new person clicks on the button, they get a new Bitcoin address to deposit to. And so from a blockchain perspective, it gives you like a little bit more privacy in that fashion. But the downside would be that if there's this like malicious JavaScript, and I would consider it to be malicious, frankly, running in the background trying to identify people who are donating through that button, I don't want that to happen. It's really none of the business of Coinbase. There's no reason for them to believe that people who are donating to me are Coinbase customers, and so the idea that it would be know your customer, it's know other people's customers, and that's bullshit. That's not a law. That's just being nosy and violating other people's privacy. So I haven't been able to confirm that, but I'm certainly concerned that they are doing it to people that are not even their customers. And so what else could they be doing with this data? Well, if it's helping a company identify a particular individual across a variety of different websites, then the other thing you could do is sell it to someone else, to some advertising company, like Google Ads, or some spammer, or to a government agency or whomever, basically saying, well, I just have a really popular website. I can collect data about people. I have other sources of data about some of those people because they're giving me their names, their bank accounts, etc. And other people, I don't necessarily know their names, but I do know that they're giving donations and sending money to these other people that I can identify, my own customers. And so this is valuable data to anyone that's nosy and that wants to violate privacy. And so certainly I think there would be a legitimate fear that this information is being sold or monetized in some fashion and sent to other people who the customer has no agreement with, right? This could be a potential violation of privacy. So I think it's definitely something worth looking at more closely with Coinbase and similar companies, and I would like to see what Coinbase has to say about this publicly. Now, the other news article that I wanted to talk about today is with respect to this news coming out of the New York Department of Financial Services. They put out an initial proposal for their so-called bit licenses, which is a license that companies would be required to get if they want to do Bitcoin-related business with customers that live in New York State. And New York State, of course, also includes New York City, which is one of the financial capitals of the world, for now at least. And so I wanted to look at this article written by Bruce Fenton. By and large, I think it's a very good article. I'll point out perhaps areas where I disagree, but wanted to just read through the article and kind of help explore this news coming out of Ben Losky and the financial services for New York. So the title of the article is Bitcoin, Why Engage with Ben Losky? And written by Bruce Fenton, who tweeted the day that this news came out. He said, "A person no one elected," referring to Ben Losky, "is creating laws no one asked for to prevent problems which don't exist." So he writes, Superintendent for Financial Services of New York, Ben Losky, has issued his proposed regulations for a bit license governing Bitcoin businesses. I've warned people repeatedly about the fact that regulators are not our friends, so the onerous proposal came as no surprise. Many Bitcoiners seemed shocked and caught off guard that the proposal could be so unrealistically strict. Some examples include Bitcoin companies being unable to retain profits in Bitcoin, requirements that small startups hire expensive compliance personnel, requirements that inventors and programmers obtain a license before creating new altcoins, and rules that would essentially end mining, etc. Regulations are at the core of a thinly veiled ban of Bitcoin in New York. These actions didn't surprise me at all. Mr. Losky has proven himself to be a corrupt and dishonest political manipulator who is a clear enemy of progress, innovation, and this community. So why engage him? I thought that was a pretty bold statement, which I guess the author is about to back up, so let's read some more about that. Definitions: dishonest, not being truthful. For example, Ben Losky claiming that he had no knowledge of Charlie Shrem's arrest timing, then using it as political theater during his hearings, claiming he would carefully evaluate input from the Bitcoin space and then not doing so, etc. And they're referring to the fact that Charlie Shrem was arrested very close to the public hearings about cryptocurrencies as an apparent means to put Bitcoin and Bitcoin users in a bad light. They arrested him for supposed money laundering charges, etc. And Charlie Shrem actually just attended the Bitcoin Chicago conference. He had to do so on a little screen on some little robot wheels. So he's still under house arrest related to these charges. Now, why is Benjamin Losky corrupt? Corrupt means dealing in a dishonest manner for personal gain, for example, working with bank cronies to further protectionist policies which greatly harm jobs in Bitcoin, pushing policies which do not have a primary goal of serving the public good, etc. And finally, political manipulator, using political tactics, media duplicity, political theater, such as invoking the events of like a tragedy of 9/11, which was mentioned in the hearings, and fears of terrorism as the justification for these anti-innovation actions, when, in reality, all Bitcoin on planet Earth has only a fraction of the value we know with certainty was laundered by HSBC, for example. Furthermore, Benjamin Losky's power does not come from competence, knowledge, or even election, but from threats of violence. Let's be honest, without the threat of violence, his threat of using his power as an unelected political official to place people in jail for use of math, he would have no standing in this space, and most Bitcoin people would have never even heard of him. If Mr. Losky had to let his ideas stand on their own merit without force and violence, he would be laughed out of every Bitcoin meeting with his proposal that Satoshi should have had a license before inventing a coin. And I think that is an interesting point, as I brought up on the Bitcoin group last week. If you have this kind of self-defeating statement, the idea that somehow the person who created this new technology should have gone to jail and never invented the technology. Well, if that happened, the technology would have never existed in the first place, and so the question of whether to regulate it in this fashion wouldn't come up. And I think that's a self-defeating statement. I think that's important to point out. I think that's a good point by Bruce. So instead of laughing at him, we've made him famous in this community and look to him as some sort of leader simply because he has threatened us with violence. A good point. So why deal with him? The extreme and damaging bit license proposal shows that he has no intention of operating in an honorable, fair, or even remotely logical manner. Why spend time spinning wheels in an attempt to use logic to show the reasons his plans are bad when he clearly does not care about the merit of his plans? Bitcoin leaders keep seeming to be holding out the hope that with just one more white paper and one more Ask Me Anything on Reddit, or one more legal letter, we can get him to see the light. He does not care about right or wrong. He cares about fame and personal gain in his political career and helping his banking cronies by harming Bitcoin. By engaging him, we only further this harm. So what does Bruce propose as an alternative? I do not believe that it's productive to engage with someone who wishes us ill and who has shown us no intention to operate honestly or with reason or the most basic logic. I think that all the significant advocacy efforts wasted on engaging with Losky should be instead spent on productive activities which are actually likely to yield positive results. Some specifics. Focus on elected officials who have accountability to voters and actually care what we say, who cares about votes and who cares about jobs. This includes reward for those who support technology and pressure on those who do not. I actually think that elected officials are not a particularly fruitful group of individuals to focus on either, but I do suppose that they are slightly more fruitful than unelected officials. Focus on the governor of New York who appoints Mr. Lossky's position to make the irresponsible actions of this appointee politically costly and apparent. Yeah, I don't think that it's going to be politically costly. I don't think enough people care about Bitcoin that they would actually vote for a different governor based on who he appointed to this particular esoteric position. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful position, but to the average person, it's quite esoteric, so that seems unlikely to me. Focus on court challenges fighting the legality of these regulations. To me, this is a losing battle. Focus on media efforts which highlight the lost jobs and other drawbacks this causes. The media is an okay arena to engage, I think. I've certainly done that, and I think to some success. Keep in mind, though, that in many ways the mainstream media is kind of like, in the United States at least, is kind of like a fourth branch of the government. And so I think that either you go for the mainstream media, which has a more significant audience, or you go for the alternative media, in which case you may find yourself somewhat preaching to the choir and have a much smaller audience. So that can be a little bit tricky, but I certainly think that it is a bit more voluntary of a place to engage than any kind of political appointee. Focus on humor and other tools which will illustrate how backwards these policies are. If you have a legislative focus, focus on actual bills and laws which are voted on by elected officials, yada, yada, yada. Focus on supporting efforts in Congress. Focus on positive actions in states with more logical and honest engagement. I guess you would be thinking of places like California. Completely and totally ignore a person who has shown himself to be a clear enemy of technology and progress. Make him irrelevant. No more press engagement, no more followers and retweets, no more AMAs, no more letters or explanations. I think out of all of the points that he's talking about as prescriptive, I really like that point. The idea that you would give any attention to this completely insane, narcissistic man is, I think, quite good advice. Let's see what else. Ignore and block NY and let them sleep in the preposterous bed they have made. I think that's probably a natural consequence of some of this bit license stuff. I don't think that New York City is going to be a capital of the world for cryptocurrency finance. It's just not going to happen because of these maniacal people that have taken power there. If people feel that they must engage with Lossky, then he should be fought in court, in the court of public opinion, and ridiculed and challenged in the media. I say ignore him, shun him. He has lied to us and proven himself our enemy, and is doing so not out of misunderstanding or because he's not up to speed with understanding Bitcoin, but because he actively seeks to harm us while using slick media tactics to cultivate an image of being open to input. And yeah, I do think it is rather gross and creepy that this guy keeps coming to Reddit with AMAs as if he is somehow soliciting the feedback of the community. I think if you want to look at what happens to people that engage with him in terms of giving him feedback, I would look at Charlie Shrem and Charlie Shrem as one of the original individuals to illustrate and outline the ideas for this bit license idea, now sitting in his parents' home somewhere under house arrest. I think that is a potent example of what happens. Let Ben Lossky go down in history as the man who lost New York its status as a global financial center. Let him run for governor on the platform that he cost his state jobs. I do not believe these actions can succeed in killing Bitcoin, and therefore the man who proposed these policies will look like a Luddite, the name given to people who once smashed looms because they believed technology which made hand sewing easier was evil technology. And that's a rather apt comparison. And lastly, Bruce writes, some have said that New York is key because in this example other states will follow. Let's expose these policies for what they are and give incentive to other regulators to not follow suit. Let's be productive. Let's stop complimenting him on his foresight, and let's instead be honest. And I do think that there is a significant number of people in the Bitcoin community, especially around venture capitalists and some entrepreneurs and people within the Reddit community who have been kind of sucking up to Ben Losky, trying to blow smoke up his ass to ingratiate themselves with him, and it's going to have no effect on his behavior whatsoever. I mean, I'm sure he enjoys it, being called the kind of a forward thinker in the crypto financial space, but it's not going to charm him into accepting Bitcoin or decreasing the regulations or anything else. I think if you are an entrepreneur in New York, my advice would be stop making calls to his office and stop asking him out to dinner, and work on Plan B and moving your business out of New York State. That would be my advice. I'm certainly no major entrepreneur, but I feel like I have a pretty good idea of where this is going to go in the New York area. So let's take a look at some of your questions. So Pat writes, thanks for the work you've been doing on Darkcoin. Where do you think it can go in price when considering its technology, market, and competitors? Do you think its anonymous technology will be superior? That's a good question. So trying to decide which privacy, like if you're betting on a particular altcoin based on its privacy properties, that speculation is incredibly complicated. If it's just a short-term speculation, then really what you're looking at is sentiment, marketing, etc., right? The actual technology doesn't matter nearly as much. And I've certainly seen plenty of coins that have talked about privacy in a most unimpressive kind of fashion. But if you're trying to do it on a long-term basis, it's incredibly complicated, because the point is that over the time horizon that you're investing in the coin, you need to think that its technology is going to be superior. It's going to start out as superior. It's going to maintain superiority over a period of time, recognizing that other privacy-centric coins are going to continue to develop their technologies as well. I think we see in some cases the coins get stuck in time. Fedora coin seems to be an example of that. That was a coin that when I started tracking out on the show was one of not many privacy-oriented coins, but to my knowledge they haven't really done anything to advance the state of the art for Fedora coin. And so there'll be some coins like that, but if you look at some of these more serious teams, Vertcoin, Vericoin, Anoncoin, Zero Cash obviously is still on the horizon. There's a lot of competitors, Bytecoin and the other crypto note currencies. There's a lot of competitors in this space, and so you need to consider the underlying technologies, how much legs it has, how scalable the technology is going to be. That's certainly been a criticism of the crypto note people in the past, is that in order for them to scale up the anonymity that you get with ring signatures, that increases the transaction sizes, and so then you get into some scalability issues there. So there's just a lot of different stuff to consider. And of course, how many developers are working on it? Is it just one guy is going to get burned out and tired and get bored with the project, or is it a whole team of people where they can take little vacations and get some rest while they're working on it? And there's a lot of stuff to consider over a long-term period. And long-term in this this tiny little space is like 6 months or 9 months or 12 months. So in terms of who's going to be superior in the long run, I certainly don't know. I'm not sure that Darkcoin had the input of the kind of academic rigor that you saw, for example, going into the crypto note technology. where there were some a team of very serious cryptographers that developed the crypto note technology. I'm not sure that Evan would necessarily make that claim that he is equivalent to the cooperation of a team of serious cryptographers. I don't even know that he necessarily has like, not to put down Evan whatsoever, but I'm not sure that he has like that very solid experience kind of cryptography background that we seem to see with the crypto node developers, and is certainly evident with the zero cash developers. So it's kind of hard to say exactly what's going to happen with Darkcoin in the future. Will it continue to just be Evan? Will there be other people giving input to the design of DarkSend? How many iterations of DarkSend will take place? Now we're up to DarkSend Plus, I guess. And so is there going to be DarkSend Plus Plus? How many? Is it something that's just going to be continually iterated to infinity? I don't know. And so far, I guess the changes that we've seen, the DarkSend technology seems to be primarily coin join based. There was some talk about doing something around ring signatures in the past. But we haven't seen any kind of like very fundamental technological changes. Like going to ring signatures would have been a major redesign, I think, of Darkcoin. And the current design for DarkSend Plus, improving on the DarkSend design, is more of an iterative change. It's not a huge dramatic change. It's doing a bit more coin join, tweaking the way that the coin join works, rather than trying a totally new, different technology. And so it may be that the coins that do the best in the future are the ones that are willing to make the most sweeping changes and that are able to avoid forking related issues that come up when you make these big changes. So perhaps there's a coin out there that's going to do ring signatures, and then zero cash is going to go out. They're going to dump all of the ring signature stuff. They're going to move on to zero cash, and they'll continue the value of the tokens from iteration to iteration, but they will be changing substantial amounts of the underlying technology. Perhaps that's the type of privacy-centric coin that's going to do the best in the future. I don't know. We haven't seen one quite like that, but there's no reason necessarily why that couldn't happen if you have the right development team behind it. So I talked about this a little bit on the show a little while ago, but just as a very quick summary, if we're looking at the different technologies and how they rank, several people have said, and I think I sort of agree with this, you would put zero cash on top because it's the most scalable and the most sophisticated. There's some potential that the underlying crypto, which is fairly new, they'll find some primitive, basic problem with that technology, and it will be ditched. There's some possibility of that, but it's not a possibility that's evident on the horizon exactly. Perhaps below that you would put the crypto note technologies, and then maybe some of these other privacy-oriented technologies, like Cloakcoin, like Vericoin, and Darkcoin, etc. So we'll just have to wait and see. What we really need are some well-written papers comparing the different techniques. We need some better tools to measure the efficacy of these techniques, and we don't have anything like that whatsoever. I really think that something I want to push for in the next year is to build a consensus around this idea of measuring what these different privacy approaches are doing, and so that we can compare apples to apples rather than just making these claims about, well, this one seems better than that one. I think that's really important. As far as the code review itself goes, I haven't started reviewing any actual code yet. We're still just focusing on the design aspect of things, and that's 99% Evan's work. But I'll certainly let people know when I start really digging into the code. Got a few questions through Twitter. The first one is, what is your opinion on Vertcoin's solution to ASIC mining? Will they eventually come out with an ASIC miner for Script N? I'm not familiar with Vertcoin's mining stuff in particular. I know that there's lots of different approaches that people are trying to take, and they seem to fall into a few different categories so far when it comes to ASIC resistance. One is you try to come up with an algorithm that's going to be challenging, technologically challenging to make an ASIC for that one specific algorithm. So you can try to make it, for example, very memory intensive. Apparently, it's much more difficult to build specific devices to deal with memory as opposed to computation. Like if you need just a little bit of memory at any given point, but it can just be computed really quickly, that's very that lends itself well to building an ASIC, and I think that the SHA-256 double algorithm that's used by Bitcoin falls under that category. And other people have tried to make other kinds of algorithms that are less focused on the computation, more focused on the RAM or the memory that you need to store stuff while you're doing these computations, and that's supposed to be more ASIC resistant. Ultimately, no matter what you do, what kind of algorithm you're going to have, people are going to be able to build devices that give you some kind of advantage, right? And what you're just trying to do is trying to reduce that advantage as much as possible. I don't think it's possible to come up with an algorithm that's going to be truly ASIC resistant or ASIC proof or anything in that regard. Another thing that some other coins are doing, and this is not an area of expertise for me, right? But I know a little bit about this. Another thing that they're doing is saying, well, let's have a bunch of different algorithms all at once. Maybe they change every block, or maybe you can choose from a bunch of different ones, which is the case with X11 coin and Darkcoin, which is the first X11 coin, where you have 11 different currencies that you can, algorithms that you can use for mining, and there's this sort of consensus among the community that if people ever got really good at building ASICs for one or a bunch of these algorithms, they would just be swapped out and replaced with other algorithms. And so in that sense, the algorithm keeps changing, and there's the threat that it can be changed at any moment, and so that threat disincentivizes people who would build ASICs, because if they think that the community is just going to drop that algorithm from their coin, then maybe they don't want to actually put in all the original investment to create those ASICs. So there's lots of things that you can do in terms of moving the goalposts when it comes to mining a particular coin. And again, I think that the market naturally will try to find any little advantage that it can when it comes to mining. So I don't think you can ever make it a kind of like one CPU per one CPU one vote kind of system. The miners are always going to find ways to gain advantages and price other people out of the mining, I think. So, which is unfortunate in a lot of ways, but I hope I'm proven wrong. But that's my current understanding of the field. Another question through Twitter. Do you believe that Dogecoin had its day and will now fade away? That's a good question. It does seem like Dogecoin is on a pretty steady downtrend. Let me see if I can pull up the CRIPC chart here. So it seems like Dogecoin has been on a pretty significant downtrend for a while now. And it would help if I spelled CRIPC right. And actually, for the dollar value, let's even go to coinmarketcap.com for Dogecoin. So as I pull this chart up here, it seems like Dogecoin has been in a downtrend. There was an expectation that this NASCAR race was going to change things in a major way, and that hasn't been the case. And we just haven't seen any steady reversal of that trend. So I'm looking at the Dogecoin chart here for the last 180 days, I believe. And it seemed to have peaked around mid-February, something like that, and then just down, 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 all the way down to, so up from a market cap of around $90 million down to around, 20 or so million dollars now. That's a pretty significant price slump. And that's not even in concert with Bitcoin exactly. I guess it's somewhat similar to the Bitcoin. So no, that's the Bitcoin price. Yeah, so this is not just because Bitcoin has gone down or anything like that, or all coins have gone down. This is a story that's particular to Doge. And the question for me when it comes to Doge is always comes back to, well, let's say that you have a great community, a great attitude that people have towards Dogecoin, oriented on fun and making things accessible and so forth. Is that enough to compete with other cryptocurrencies, or is that something that can be replicated in other communities? And will it last? If I would imagine that as the price continues to slump, you'll see people more and more drop out of the Dogecoin community, and I wonder if that makes it less fun, less enjoyable, less accessible, less creative. I don't know, but that's sort of the question that I have about Dogecoin. So I'm not hugely bullish on Dogecoin. I think I really like a lot of stuff about the emphasis on making things fun and not hating on newbies and all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's really cool about the Dogecoin community, but really those are things that I like about the community, that I like about the people, rather than the coin itself. And fundamentally, the value of the coin comes from the coin itself, right? So another question, what do you think of Vericoin's rollback and the future of their technology? That's a great question. So what happened with Vericoin was a lot of the Vericoin that existed, maybe some like approximately 30% of it, existed on the MintPal exchange. So as someone pointed out to me, well, this kind of means that people were not holding on to their Vericoin for the long term. They were looking to trade it actively. I think that's an interesting observation. It's also possible that perhaps maybe their wallet software is not very good at it's not very accessible, and so people are just using MintPal as a wallet. But it seems more likely to me that it's just being more actively traded. The people who were looking to dump their Vericoin on short notice if necessary, in a way that you don't really see with Bitcoin in the same way. So then MintPal was hacked. Someone took all of the Vericoin that was held in hot storage, and apparently MintPal made a mistake and didn't have nearly as much in cold storage as they ought to have. And so some approximately 30% of all the Vericoin was stolen. And so then the Vericoin, and this is the proof of stake coin, right? So a lot of the protection of the network is based on the idea that it's difficult for someone to acquire a bunch of Vericoin. They would have to buy it up, and the price would go up and up and up, and it would be difficult to do a 51% attack on the coin based on this. But what this attacker showed was, well, if someone like MintPal has a bunch of this coin and they screw it up, then you can spend a lot less than 51% of the total market cap, hacking a website and stealing their Vericoin. So the Vericoin developers were put in a difficult situation. And I guess something that this shows that's interesting about proof of stake as a means of protecting the network is, if you operate a proof of stake coin and you're using that as a means to protect the network, now you have a very delicate relationship with people who hold large amounts of that coin. People who are wealthy, exchanges, any other kind of service that would hold coins for you and for other people, you have a very important relationship with them. And in many ways, it's kind of a counterparty risk, in fact. perhaps what Vericoin did not really realize was that they did have counterparty risk in the form of this exchange called MintPal. And if MintPal screws up their security and the coin gets stolen, now it becomes much, much cheaper, much easier to perform a type of 51% attack. So they decided to react to this by rolling back all of the transactions that took place to just before the hack. So they took all the coins back from the hacker, and there were other transactions that were rolled back as well. And altogether, aside from the hack, there was maybe about $4,000 transmitted worth of Vericoin, which is not a huge amount of Vericoin. But I think it does potentially set a dangerous precedent and establish a kind of lack of confidence in the authenticity if you are willing to roll back the blockchain, if you're willing to modify the blockchain in that way, what exactly does that mean? And I think that could undermine confidence in the integrity of the blockchain. The blockchain is supposed to be this thing that just never changes, it's permanent, it's there forever, and that hasn't been the case now for Vericoin. And so that's, I'm sure, is a concern for people that would use it as a payment network. If you're not sure that your payment is going to be continually honored in that public ledger of transactions, that's a real cause for concern. So, and I think you also don't want there to be a kind of precedent where popular opinion decides which transactions go through. Certainly Bitcoin could have done that. Like, all this money was stolen by feds from Silk Road users, and Bitcoin users could have gotten together and said, hey, let's exclude those Bitcoins from circulation, or let's roll back the blockchain, or whatever it is. And I don't think you want ownership of your coin to be determined by popular opinion. That is a very bad way to conduct a money. It really negatively impacts fungibility and just the overall trust for that particular form of money. People don't want to think that if they fall into the bad graces of the general public and from the other participants in their network, that their transactions can simply be taken away. And so, but it is, if you have a proof of stake coin, it's tough to say, like, oh, well, there goes 30% of the coins. Oh, well, I hope that they don't get another 20% to be able to launch their 51% attack on a very consistent basis. That is a difficult spot for them to be in, and perhaps a lack of foresight on their part. Another question this is from Chris Ellis, Mr. Chris Ellis, the famous Brit from the World Crypto Network. He says, would you say that Vericoin devs bailed out MintPal, a private custodian of funds who made a basic mistake? Shouldn't people pay for their mistakes? It's certainly possible that this was something that was in their minds, but they have a friendly relationship with the exchange that maintains enough of their coins, enough of volume of trading that they had 30% of Vericoins. That's a lot. And there may have been a fear of snubbing them, of going against the wishes of MintPal. I could certainly imagine that possibility, but it seems to me the primary concern would be about defending against that 51% attack. And not only would it make, if they don't do the rollback, not only is there some malicious actor or group of actors who now have a better chance at doing a 51% attack, which could really mess up Vericoin, right? Or they dump the coin and it really ruins the price for a while. But it also shows a really deep vulnerability to 51% 51% attacks through this kind of theft. And that could undermine confidence in the coin as well. And so if I put myself in their place, I would say it seems more likely to me that they were concerned about this lack of confidence stemming from 51% attacks, rather than just being friendly with MintPal and wanting to bail them out. That would be my guess. Another question for the Google Q&A app from Snowboarder. He asks, superficially, which coin has the coolest wallet? I think Darkcoin has a pretty cool wallet, but probably the neatest wallet, the most fun wallet that I've used so far is the Dark wallet for Bitcoin. I would say that they have a pretty slick, enjoyable, fun interface. They've got like a little troll box in there and all these different ways of anonymizing your identity, interacting in the chat, and these really innovative ways of kind of like pooling related funds together in pockets, and it's just a very cool app that I would definitely tell and encourage people to check out if you haven't used it before. Of course, it's still in alpha, so you should use it with testnet coins for the time being, I would say. Yet another question from Mr. Ellis. Short of abolishment, in your opinion, should the NSA build an open API so that members of the public can access their private data? Perhaps they could use some cool analytical tools. I think it would be difficult to build an API that allow people to access only their own private data and not other people's data. I don't know what you would use as a keying material. That would be a pretty incredible key distribution problem. Give every citizen of the United States, or maybe even more broadly outside of the United States, give them a public key that they get to share with the NSA to decrypt their data with the private key. That would be probably pretty challenging and beyond the capabilities of any one government. Yeah, I don't know. This seems kind of like a Lord of the Rings thing to me. I think that if you have that ring, you cast it into the Forge of Mount Doom, and you don't try to find some positive use for it. That would be my thoughts on the NSA. And just a couple other questions through Twitter. Let's see here. Someone asked how Vertcoin stealth addresses compare to the Darkcoin anonymity approach, and I assume you could also compare it to the Bitcoin stealth addresses as well. I don't know enough about Vertcoin's stealth addresses to really speak on that, but I'll put that on my to-do list to take a look at. Another person asked if there's a specific state that's best for Bitcoin. I don't know. I guess in the US, California seems to be the least evil, but California is also a state where the politicians and citizens rather like their social welfare programs. And I think when they see cryptocurrencies succeeding and what effect that's going to have on social welfare programs, they may change their tune about Bitcoin. I don't think there's any state in particular that will be ultimately friendly to Bitcoin. There may be some states in, for example, Southeast Asia that learn to kind of cope with Bitcoin, that learn to roll with the punches, so to speak, but it's not going to be anywhere inside the United States. If you're curious about what the United States is going to look like once the dollar loses favor, I definitely recommend the novel and to much less extent the movies based on the novel Atlas Shrugged. I think that paints a very interesting portrayal of the post-dollar United States. Someone commented about Doge through Twitter. Doge had good PR in the beginning, but not so much anymore. PR is a very important part of altcoins that is often overlooked. Yeah, true. Altcoins usually, in most cases, they remind me of companies, and so marketing is hugely important for companies. Even if you have a great product, you still need good marketing. There's very few products that simply sell themselves, and even if you do have such a product, good marketing doesn't help. It doesn't hurt either. So that's a good point. What precautions should people take in New York to protect their coins and coin businesses for the upcoming months? Well, from what I understand, if you're simply accepting Bitcoin as a business, that's not a Bitcoin business per se. If you're just accepting it as a medium of exchange, if I understand correctly, based on the current proposals, you wouldn't require a BIT license, but you would certainly think that you will have fewer Bitcoin customers if all of the businesses that allow people to get Bitcoins are subject to these terrible, ridiculous regulations. So it certainly depends on what type of business it is, but I really think if you're a serious Bitcoin business, and if you're not simply a political entrepreneur, I mean, there's lots of political entrepreneurs out there that are looking to make money off of Bitcoin. They're looking for a way to basically look at government's agitation towards Bitcoin and see if they can provide a service relevant to that. I think coin validation is a very good example of that, as I've talked about many times prior on the show. And but if you're not a political entrepreneur, if you're actually looking to sell people useful stuff on the market, I would get the hell out of New York, if at all possible. And as far as your coins go, I mean, there's nothing on the horizon indicating that New York is going to start going after people's individuals' coins. Of course, that will happen eventually, and I think that the best way to do that is to learn how to store your coins securely and to keep them off of third-party websites like exchanges as much as possible, and of course learn how to anonymize them. And there's lots of resources that I've talked about on the show before, talking about how to accomplish that. So I think that's going to do it for Dark News for today. This day on July 22nd, about halfway through summer. I hope everyone's enjoying their summer. Last week or so I've been mostly stuck inside, hunched in front of my computer in a dark room, peering at the bright monitor light. But once I finish some projects and wrap up this code review and for Darkcoin and whatnot, I'll definitely try to get out there and get some more sun and some more beach time and all that good stuff. But yeah, if you're not in the middle of a code review, definitely get out there and get some sunlight and some vitamin D and enjoy the summer months while you can. Or if you're on the other side of the world, then hold in there for your actual summer. Although it seems to me that people on the other side of the world seem to be much closer to the equator and therefore in a much cozier position. Bastards. But I won't hold the grudge against you. So that will do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the show as usual, you can send some bits, QR codes in the edited version of the show, and I'll put some addresses in the description of this video as well when I get a chance. And that's about it. Have a very dark week in the meantime, and I'll see you next week.